Welcome back to the BookEnds YouTube channel. I'm James McGowan.
I'm Jessica Faust.
And we are literary agents who have taken our popular blog to YouTube to discuss all things publishing. So we are shocked to find out how many authors may not read their contract before they sign it.
May? Or just
do not read their contract before they sign it.
I mean, I have always known there are authors who didn't read their contract. And I get it if it's like your fifth contract with your publisher, maybe you don't read it as much. And of course, that's why you have a literary agent, right? So you trust your agent to negotiate the contract. But now in the day of DocuSign, it's very clear, because if the DocuSign goes out and comes back 10 minutes later, I'm pretty sure you didn't read 36 pages in 10 minutes. Or I would like to know how you did it so I can read submissions.
I would love that trick. Yes, so, and I can hear the comments now, but that's what you're paid for. And yes, it's what we are paid for.
Of course.
But we are paid to negotiate the contract. We are not paid to read it for you.
Well, we're not actually paid for the contract. In other words, I am not personally agreeing to do certain things by the contract. I'm negotiating on your behalf, but it's your contract with the publisher, so you should know what you're agreeing to.
Right. So,
even as simple as a due date.
Exactly. Yes, there are things in a contract. So first of all, when you get an offer from a publisher, you're usually hammering out most of the details, you and your agent, with the publisher beforehand. So things like your advance, your royalties, what rights you're licensing, things of that nature, those are usually discussed beforehand. So you should have an understanding of what the deal terms you're agreeing to are. Then
this is more or less what your agent will say to you. This is what our offer is. I negotiated. Here's where we ended up. Here are all these terms. Do you agree? So
exactly. That's
sort of how it starts. And that is about maybe 5 to 10 things. But the contract is about, I don't know, how many clauses are in a contract?
Usually in the 20s plus.
At least. Yeah.
So what happens then is those deal terms that you agreed on, the editor puts them in their systems, goes to the contracts department. They take all of those terms, they input into your agency's standard language for
boilerplate. Yeah, we have a boilerplate with every publisher, and they would plug it into our boilerplate.
Exactly. So then that gets sent to us, just to give everybody the process. That gets sent to us. An agent will thoroughly read, review against their other contracts that they might have, or their knowledge of contracts. And once it's in a spot,
and negotiate.
And negotiate, of course.
Everything gets negotiated, even if it's in the boilerplate. I can guarantee you,
everything.
At least at BookEnds, it's getting negotiated.
Right. If it's standard in the boilerplate, we want better. We're definitely asking for it.
Mm-hmm.
So then, once we get to the point where we're ready for you to sign, then it comes to you. And at this point, we are hoping you're reading it.
Yeah, I mean, we do not expect you to read it with an eye towards negotiating. We have done that. We are not expecting you to read it to understand all of the legal minutia. I mean, I get it. I've signed enough contracts in my life. Anybody who has taken out a mortgage on a house knows that you don't read all of it, but you do want to know how much you're going to owe at the end of the day, how your payments are going to be paid, what your payments are going to be covered. There's basic information, just like in a mortgage contract and the publishing contract, that you want to know what you're committing yourself to.
I was just going to say, the most important thing to know about a contract is, sure, you've written the book, but that's not where your responsibilities stop. So a publisher's contract is saying what they're going to do for you, but more importantly, what you're going to do for them. And you shouldn't sign anything without understanding what is my responsibility here, both financially, performance-wise, or anything of the sort. You shouldn't sign without having an understanding of how you play into the 13-plus page document you just signed.
Yeah.
Some of them are 36 pages.
How long these are.
Some of them are 36 pages, and I'm never going to let that go.
You don't have to, because it shouldn't be 36 pages.
Anyway, so you shouldn't sign that without having an understanding of what you're responsible for.
So let's run through a few things, a few of the clauses and things that we think that the author should particularly check on. And first are the upfront conversation you had with your agent, those upfront negotiations that you committed to and agreed to before it went to the contract. The first one is the territory, right? Are
Oh,
you
grant of rights.
right? The grant of rights. So, who's holding performance rights? Who holds audio rights? Foreign rights? Those are really the big three. I
Yep.
would say there's a lot more in there, but those are the big three that probably came up in upfront negotiations. Check those. Honestly, check on your agent. Your agent has done their best, they've negotiated, but as with your manuscript, it never hurts to have a second set of eyes on something.
There is such, you know what? Unfortunately, there is such thing as human error still. There could always be a typo.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you are reading it, look for those things.
Yep. The second one is how and when you're getting paid.
Yes. So now this can often be spread in several different
Mm.
sections of the contract. There's usually an
Yeah.
advance clause that says how much you're going to get up front. There's usually a clause that outlines all of the royalties for the different formats. And then there's usually a clause that outlines all the different splits for different subsidiary rights that you've licensed to the publisher.
My guess is you're not probably going to know all the royalties. That's not part of the upfront negotiation. You know, your agent has managed all of that, the splits. Know the advances. Know, do your math. Double check that the payments add up to the total. At the
That
very
is one of
least,
the first things.
if you're not going to do anything else with your contract, do the math on the advance.
Yes, I remember one of the first things you taught me. Like, I think when I was when I was an intern, is did you check that the advance payments equal the total advance? And I was like, I mean, I kind of just assumed they did, and you're like, no, like don't assume because typos happen and
It does
mistakes
happen.
in math happen.
Yeah, because you know the publisher can easily, especially the higher the advance, the more it's broken down. Well, if it's broken down into 10 payments, it's pretty easy for the publisher just to, in typing it in, miss one of those payments entirely. And the math doesn't add up. So you want to make sure the math adds
The math has to math.
up.
Um, okay, so in addition to that, delivery clauses.
Yeah.
So I think these sort of kind of go hand in hand, right? Because a lot of payments are triggered upon your performance. So when do you have to deliver the first draft, the second draft, the final draft, whatever it might be? And then does that correlate with the dates that you've agreed to? And does that correlate with the payout that you've agreed to?
And do the dates still work?
Right.
Contracts these days are taking forever. And this is, I believe, since the pandemic, I also don't believe it's going to change.
No.
For whatever reason, contracts were always slow. Somehow they've gotten slower. Therefore, if you get your contract and something has happened in your life and you no longer feel that that due date is going to work, now is a great time to bring that up with your agent.
I have also received contracts with delivery dates that were 3
Fast.
months ago, 2 weeks
Mm-hmm.
ago. It
Yeah.
happens. We've signed contracts where the delivery date had to be moved to like 2 weeks from the date that we were signing because the book was already in the hands of the editor or something along those lines.
Yeah. Totally.
But it's taken so long that the date is no longer logical.
Yeah. So check that, see how that feels to you. Have a conversation with your agent. In addition to the delivery dates, know what materials are expected from you. If you're writing adult, YA, middle grade fiction, typically it's just the manuscript. But especially in nonfiction, maybe picture books, you might have art. Nonfiction, you might be expected to be responsible for the index. Hopefully your
Permission.
agent has fixed that so you're not, but know all of the pieces. You know, if you went on submission with a heavily illustrated nonfiction and you promise that, then you have to know how many pieces of art, when they're due, and all of those other things.
Right. If you're doing anything photo illustrated and you need permissions, if you decide you want to use a song lyric, you need permissions. So those are usually sent along the time of the delivery of the manuscript.
Yeah, permissions. That's a big one.
Yep. Okay, so after that, something else to keep in mind are the option clause and other competitive clauses. So the option clause is saying what happens to your next book. What do you have to do to that publisher with your next book? Do you have to send it? What does the next book have to be? Things along those lines. And the competitive clauses will tell you what can be published and when, how close to the publication date for this, and all other sorts of things.
These two things become concerning, most concerning for me in my experience, when authors decide to self-publish and forget these existed, and I've seen that. I've gotten phone calls from publishers that said, "Hey, did you know this book just showed up on Amazon and it goes against the contract?" So it's really important. But even if you're planning a whole nother series or something like that, and you're going to want your agent to go out on submission, knowing what these say and how these will impact that is important. But also, this is one of those reasons you have to have a good communication with your agent. Because if I've negotiated this whole contract without an understanding of you having this other idea you're going to want me to go on submission on, I may not have made space for that.
I think one of the most important parts of these clauses and why every author should read them is to manage their own expectations as well. Because a lot of people will sign a book contract and be like, what's next? Like, where do we go from here? But those clauses also bring with them a schedule, right? Like a timeline of when we can do the next steps. So understanding what happens here so you can know what to expect next.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so then one of the last buckets of contract clauses were termination clauses. And there are clauses in there for both how you can terminate the agreement and how the publisher can terminate the agreement. And you want to know
and what happens when you do.
Right, like, what happens to your money?
Yeah, that's the biggest question, right?
The rights, yeah.
Yeah, it's usually not as simple as you just call the publisher and go, I decided I don't want to write this book. Right. So knowing, especially if you think you're not going to want to write the book later, what that would entail is important.
So if any of these bring about any questions, you should feel wholly comfortable bringing those questions to your agent.
That's what you have an agent for.
That is why you pay them. In my opinion, you shouldn't have to sign a contract until you're fully comfortable in knowing what that contract is saying to you. And that's what this time, when you get that final contract, and the minute you sign it, that whole time should be spent understanding and feeling comfortable with it.
Yeah, and you might go to your agent and say, I'm not happy with this. Can we change it? And the agent might say, listen, this is the best I could get. I went back and forth with them or something like that. But there is a contracts department isn't thrilled when they've sent over what they thought is final. And then we say, we have some more questions. But, part of our job is to have people not happy with us. So It's not a problem to go back and say, we have something else.
I'd rather a contracts person not be thrilled than you not be thrilled. So
that is a great way to end this.
Thank you. Well, actually, I have one more point before we do end it. So many times do I get, I never got a copy, or I can't find my copy. So once you've signed that contract, for the love of all that is holy, please save it somewhere, print it out, put it in a file, put it in a digital file, Google Drive, Dropbox, save your contract.
Don't leave it in your email. That is not saving your contract. Pretty much everything is digital now. So you need to have and it's not just for you.
I was just going to say that.
Because this has been big here. If something should happen to you, you need the people in your life to be able to know what contracts you have, how they're going to get paid, all of those other things.
Contracts usually extend to your beneficiaries and assignees and all of that. So eventually it could relate to them.
Would be handy if you had them.
Yes. So save them somewhere safe, save them somewhere where other people know where they are.
Yep.
But we hope that was helpful. That's officially our ending point.
That's the ending.
Yes. We hope it was helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you back here next time.
Bye.